Thank you. Mrs. Aziz, I have, I think, a brief question for you based on our previous witness testimony and what you said. I'm struck by how little we know in this committee, at least, about the recruitment industry that swirls around this constellation. And we've heard, I think, from Professor Faraday, a pretty stunning comment that some workers pay 2 years of their wages to be recruited into the industry. Could you provide us, you and Ms. Rajasekhar, could you provide us with some further knowledge about this industry? Does it operate in Canada, outside Canada? Is it within our sites to regulate or not? How does it function?
Yes, thank you for that question. And I think it is one that is very important and often underlooked. And, unfortunately, I think also something that, although we are very, very aware of, that, there's been numerous CBC reports. There was recently a report with respect to the sort of recruitment schemes with respect to international students. There's still very little action happening by our government to crack down on these recruitment fees. And from what we see at the Migrant Workers Centre, we often see workers. Recently, we've seen workers, a group of workers who paid $70,000 or $80,000 US in order to get a job placement in Canada. Workers who are being charged these fees inside their own countries, by a recruiter who promises that they're able to connect them with an employer in Canada, that work permit is a pathway to permanent residence, being promised all sorts of things in terms of not just the employment, but also their pathway to permanent residence. They arrive thinking, for example, I can just think of one example of a worker who arrived thinking that they were going to work in some kind of tech sector, and then, is shuttled off once they arrive in Canada to a farm. This is a trained engineer from their country of origin who is then working on a farm, who manages to find the Migrant Workers Centre, and who then has to hear this awful news from us that there is no pathway to permanent residence for that work permit that they've been issued, and in fact, that they've been completely frauded by this outside of Canada recruiter. And I do think it's important, I think there are some government officials that would say, well, it's very difficult for us to do anything with these outside recruiters, but almost always those outside recruiters are working with people inside of Canada. We wash our hands, I think, of what's happening outside of Canada, suggesting that's outside of our jurisdiction, but almost always are these recruiters tied up with somebody inside of Canada, whether that's an immigration consultant, an employer who's acting as an immigration consultant, and we cannot wash our hands of that. If we are bringing people to Canada to work, we have an obligation to protect those workers, and that includes protecting them from these unjust and illegal recruitment fees, and ensuring that there's some remedy for those workers. Just quickly, I just want to say, too, that once a worker pays those fees outside of Canada or inside of Canada, and let's say that job that they arrive for doesn't exist, or because we've seen a lot of examples of that too, workers paying these fees, coming to Canada, job doesn't exist. Employer says they've never heard of that person before. It is extremely difficult and very, very work and labor intensive to try to help that worker to gain status if they lose their status, or to put them on a path towards being able to work with authorization and recover from what they've experienced. And I think that is a very big thing that is missing from the discussion and the sort of consequences of our immigration system, that we penalize workers a lot of the time in terms of if they've lost status or they've worked without authorization because a consultant or someone's told them they're able to, that we really, really, really do put it on the worker to have to fix their situation, and often there is no fix.
Thank you, Ms. Aziz. Ms. Rajasekhar, did you have any comments to add?
I just wanted to say, and I think recently we are seeing more of that inside the Canada. They're promising, especially the agricultural migrant workers, about pathways and collecting the money. Actually, they are not even qualified for to apply for the pathways. And that leads, they pay thousands and thousands of dollars, and they are promising them guaranteed job. And the other one is the construction field, promising placement. They place them for 1 month and they take all the money and leave them, and they become the undocumented people after that because there's no status, nothing with them, and there are no papers. It's happening, and people are paying again and again. Again, with the tax fraud, it's the same. Another consultants making the false claim and end up paying. A lot of migrant workers end up penalized for paying back the money, which they are not even lead to. These are all people who are practicing immigration consultants or the paralegals who are licensed to do. This leads to people who don't have clients, our temporary migrant workers don't have a proper information about what the services that they can access, or nobody is providing. Supposed to be employers supposed to inform them about the right and what is the responsibility, what the services available to them, so they don't fall through the cracks, which is not happening because we heavily depend on the employers who are bringing them based on them, and they have some connection, heavy relationship with this, all the migrant consultant work, paralegals or immigration consultant, which lead them to. They said, oh, I will promise you that you can bring your family, and sometimes they don't even renew their applications or LMIAs that's supposed to be. And recently we lost a man who is without a status for 8 years or no healthcare access and died of cancer. He's a very young man, which leads to, there seems to be an employer who had connection with the paralegal who's supposed to help them, but they never helped them. They took the money and left it. So these are things happening day to day, every day when you are on the ground.
So much for that information. If you have any further briefs or recommendations on the recruitment industry role in all of this, please do send them to us. We have Senator.
Yes, and CCR is working with IRCC about providing settlement organization and community organization to provide that ability to support the clients with information and helping them with immigration application and form, so they will not fall through the cracks of the consultants and charging the money, which you can able to access services for free. And their staff are trained and well qualified to do the job. And I think it's in front of it, and they're submitting reports, and it's ongoing, but we can send that report as well.